Society is always talking about emotional regulation, what it means to regulate your emotions. Well, I'm here to report that this is a key factor in really evolving in life. And this is something that took me a long time to come to terms with. It's definitely something that I'm still trying to navigate when certain situations arise in my life. But emotional regulation is something that we all have to experience, just like we go through the lesson of loss and the lesson of love. We go through the lesson of being challenged or triggered with regulating our emotions. Some of you out there are going to be great at this. Others might need some work, and that's okay. Wherever you're at, please take what resonates with this message and leave the rest behind. So there's a message around regulating your emotions, meaning knowing when it's appropriate to respond versus keep silent. We never want to react, okay? Knowing the difference when it's important to respond, when a situation warrants a response versus when your silence is beneficial. Now, I don't mean to keep silent and use that as your way of emotionally regulating your response by staying silent, not speaking your truth in times of injustice, okay? If you got to speak your truth, you got to speak your truth. I'm talking about where silence is beneficial in situations where a response is not needed and a reaction is just out of the picture, is when you just don't need to say anything else because you said something so much to someone that they're just not getting it. It's not clicking with them. And so you are therefore being shown that you are not the person to teach that person or that group of people through your response and your knowledge. You can still share, but it comes a point where your silence is more powerful because other people will therefore learn from either your silence or will need to learn from someone else. Additionally, regulating your emotions warrants having the right to respond in any situation, okay? We don't ever want to react, meaning that for some of you guys, there's going to be situations where you come across stalkers in your everyday life. You're able to bite your tongue in a situation where maybe someone is sort of not really appreciating you or respecting you. You can kind of just like not say anything because it's just like they obviously don't know anything or they don't know better. So what's the point of wasting your energy and your breath to feed that energy vampire if that's something that you're picking up? Other times, you are going to need to respond. You are going to need to speak your truth and say, hey, you are disrespecting my boundaries. I don't appreciate the way that you're communicating with me. Or, hey, I don't appreciate that you're following me around. You are stalking me and I'm not comfortable with this. So where emotional regulation comes in is being able to discern what situations require something from you to put out, to give out, versus when you need to conserve yourself. So I can't really tell you guys what those situations might be because everyone has a different threshold of patience in which you will be triggered to either say something or not. Like I can tell you something, 6 years ago when I first moved to Chicago, I would come across people on the street all the time, like following me. Like I would go to the gym really late at night around like 10 p.m. I would have to take the train there and I was always safe, but like people would start to follow me, on my way to the train. And I knew that I was safe, but I was so angry. Like I would like literally lash out and like cuss them out and tell them that I'm recording them, which I was doing, and then people would leave me alone. And like as a woman, that's just something that maybe you have to do. Now, could I definitely have regulated my emotions better? Yeah, I could have just pretended that they were non-existent in my reality whatsoever until the point in which I really truly felt like I was in danger. But just the glimpse of someone following me pissed me off to the point where I had to start lashing out, and I was not responding, I was reacting. And yes, that was out of safety, maybe it was justified, but at the same time my reaction would end up actually feeding those people to the point where this is when you're still mad about it later on. Like you're still angry about it a few hours later or the rest of the day. And that's when like if you're still pissed off about something where something triggers you and you actually had to say something and you're still pissed off about it, 90% of the time, the reason why you're still pissed off is because you just gave your energy away in that situation to an energy vampire. So sometimes things don't need a reaction. They don't need your energy to feed that loosh, that frequency, that, you know, entity that is even attached to those people. Especially if you're a light worker, you're going to get monitoring spirits sometimes, you know, entities that will be attaching to regular human beings just to piss you off. One of those examples, you know, is when you meet a Karen, that meme of like the Karens that exist out there that, you know, tend to like just call something out randomly that's out of the blue. Now, I'm not talking about any of the nice Karens out there, because I definitely have a couple friends named Karen who are my loves, and I care for them, but I'm talking about that sort of cyclical meme that had been going around where people would capture videos of like random older women named, well, they weren't named Karen, but they would call them Karens, that would just like randomly say something. Like even one day, you know, just like 3 weeks ago, I was walking on the sidewalk, you know, looking down on my phone. I wasn't swerving. I wasn't in anyone's way. I was literally on the edge of the sidewalk, okay? Could have been probably walking like near the parked cars at that point. And I was looking down at my phone because I was on a strict time sensitive like situation, and I had to, you know, send a message out. And this woman passes by me and she's like, ugh, look up. And I literally like caught her like a few seconds later, but it pissed me off so much. And that's what I call an energy vampire, to the point where I turned around, I fed that energy vampire, and I reacted and I cussed her out. And you know what? She kept walking. I kept walking, but still. So this is the thing, responding or silence will do better than giving your energy away. Another example, and this is something that I'm still kind of getting used to a little bit more, in the sense that I've now had to take different measures, is that there's a man in my building that literally stalks me. And for the last 2 weeks, I hadn't seen him, and I literally was like, maybe he passed away, or maybe he moved out of the building. Like, this is finally, I don't have like trauma like from these past 2 weeks of like not running into him. Then another person with his same name started following me on my workplace. And so it got in both of my workplaces. So it got to the point where I was like thinking, like, that's so weird. I put 2 and 2 together. I'm like, this stalker that's following me in both of my workplaces, this is a different person, but they have the same name as the guy that lives in my building that's stalking me. That same day, literally last Sunday, this past Sunday, this week, the stalker came back in my building. So sometimes, you guys, boundaries are needed. You do need to respond and voice those boundaries, and energetic boundaries as well, because that person that's following me in my building is actually having an entity attached to him. Like, I literally was in the elevator with him a year and a half ago, and I looked at him because I kept running into him at all times of the day, and my schedule was not consistent. I would come home at 5:35 sometimes I would come home at 9 p.m. Sometimes I would come home, like, sometimes I wouldn't even leave the house, and then I would go downstairs to do laundry, and there he was. Or sometimes I would leave the house at 3:30 in the morning. Sometimes I would come home at 2 in the morning. Like, it was literally never consistent. My schedule was never ever consistent. It still isn't enough to be predictable, okay? And I would run into him, and so I got to the point where I knew something was attached to him. I could feel it, obviously, as a medium. So I literally looked at him in the elevator and I was like, what are you? And he was like, AI is going to take over the world. And so that's how I knew. Sometimes, you guys, especially if you're awakened, you're going to have certain people that have attachments that will trigger you, will be sent to trigger you. That is the lesson. And so obviously you want to be safe, you know, doesn't matter who you are, ladies especially, you need to take care of yourself. You want to be safe, make sure that you have your pepper spray or whatever. But these are just examples that I'm sharing with you because this lesson has been nonstop for me since I moved to Chicago. And I was encouraged by my guides to actually share the importance of emotional regulation, where certain situations just really don't need a response. So, you know, now, like, for example, you know, on Sunday I passed by that stalker in my building, held the pepper spray because he was trying to come into the elevator with me and my friends, and I was like, you're not coming in the elevator, no. And he was like, okay. And then yesterday I came home at a really random time, and there he was, like, outside of my building, just smoking a cigarette. And I literally thought to myself, I should yell at him, but instead I'm not going to say anything. And I'm no longer going to say anything unless he tries to come into the elevator at the same time as me. I'm not going to say anything at all. I'm just going to have my camera ready. And sometimes if there's a situation where you do feel you're in danger, have your camera ready. But my point in saying all this is regulate your emotions, okay? There's certain things that require you to state your boundaries and to speak your truth and to not be silent. And then sometimes you just need to know the difference, and that's when discernment comes into play. So discernment and emotional regulation are intersections of each other. They're lessons that intertwine very frequently because you will have to discern and decide. You will have to go within your heart space and intuitively figure out, is this a situation that needs my response at the moment? And I understand that in the heat of a situation where you don't have time to really think on something, try to give yourself the space to think on it, to listen and observe rather than jump the gun to respond right away. Maybe if you are given a chance to go back and respond, yes, you can do that. If you don't feel the need a few hours later after you've allowed yourself the space to listen and observe and be silent instead, then there's your answer. You don't need to respond. Hope that helps.